I wasn't sure how the Cleveland Browns offense was going to fare in the early stages of training camp. At this point, I'm glad to say I was wrong. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen. And the everyday crowd keeps growing. Make sure you do not miss out. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. If you remember the other day, I did a segment, and it was "Don't be surprised if," and a lot of it had to do with the Cleveland Browns offense and whether or not they were going to be able to start quickly against the Cleveland Browns. The first padded practices, the Cleveland Browns offense has actually fared a lot better than I expected. A lot of the red zone work, Deshaun Watson has been focusing on throwing catchable balls. Balls, obviously, that only his guys are going to catch. Great reception Thursday. Amari Cooper right over the defensive back's head. There's this route, and they've run this route for years with David Njoku, basically where he just does like a power slant. And it's basically the ball to him, the defensive back. It isn't an uncoverable route, to be honest with you. The only chance the defensive back has is to maybe sneak a hand in or hit David Njoku, who they're most likely giving up 35 to 40 pounds to, hard enough that they just lodge the ball from David Njoku. It's just not happening right now. We've seen plenty of Elijah Moore, whether it's in red zone work or whether it is in crossers and Elijah doing his thing. Browns have been showing some of the stuff we all didn't like last year necessarily with Elijah Moore. Look, you want to hand him a reverse or a jet sweep once every 3-4 weeks. That's fine. That is not the best part of Elijah Moore's game. The best part of Elijah Moore's game is that he's a pure receiver, which evidence showed last year once the Browns just let the young man play receiver and not worry about the Percy Harvinish stuff that Kevin Stefanski used to witness in his days with the Minnesota Vikings. Cedric Tillman has been pretty good, pretty darn good to this point. And when we talk about Ced in his relationship with the wide receiver room, Cedric brings something that the rest of those wide receivers don't. He's just a bigger guy, a more physically built guy. Still doesn't mean he can't, get deep. And today, 40-yard vertical reception from Deshaun Watson certainly had the crowd in oohs and ahs. Certainly after, everybody, got up in arms because, Deshaun Watson threw one chili pepper the other day, short of a net or whatever. I mean, that's the stuff that gets the minutia and the monotony of training camp, is that every single play, if it's good, is overanalyzed probably far too much than it should be. Every play rep, if it's bad, gets analyzed more than it needs to be. Just terrible, to this point. Just real quick with this, we'll get to the running back room and Dante Foreman in segment 3. Probably had a chance to be the first segment of today's episode, but the news are good. Dante Foreman has already, gone to the hospital. The nearest hospital to where they are in Greenbrier, West Virginia, was in Roanoke, Virginia. They put him on a helicopter. They got him over there. All signs are positive. But look, this still doesn't mean that maybe Dante Foreman doesn't have a concussion of any of that sort or any of that type of stuff. But it does mean neck, shoulders, everything, body structurally is good. But we'll get to the running back room. Certainly some thoughts there. We'll do that in segment 3. But Watson just continues and, not throwing every single rep, which is kind of what, we spoke about and we have spoken about. Look, not every quarterback has to do everything in training camp. It is such a more modified process now. More science gets into it and doctors get into it, and, doing away from the days where there were 3-a-days or 2-a-day padded practices, which basically was just, shortening careers because, guys were playing so much football in late July and August that it was equating, if you want to play an 18-game season, those guys were playing an 18-game season back then, the amount of hitting and beating up. But that's why, we're smarter society now. We have a lot more education. We have a lot more science to go to, where rest days are, vital for players. Certainly, monitoring the amount of throws your quarterback takes, and all that has to do with the fact that the regular season is a million times more important than the preseason or even training camp, of course. And trying to get your, quarterback, your players to be able to give you the best 60 minutes they possibly can of whatever game day is of said week. You can't really monitor the running game in this type of environment. It just doesn't work. You're really not trying to tackle running backs. And certainly they do not let anybody get close enough to get footage so we can monitor how the run blocking schemes are working. Something that we certainly would like to see, as we do have, a lot of the new being installed into this offense, through offense coordinator Ken Dorsey, and of course with Kevin Stefanski's influence, but of course with the new offensive line coach and Andy Dickerson. So you don't really get all of that. We'll get a taste of it and kind of get a glimpse of it when we get to preseason games. Certainly the players who are going to be participating in those roles in those preseason games, they're not really going to be the main players that we're going to see come week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on and so on. So, tough to get all that type of vibe. But, I mean, and you get to it, and, you have, with Amari Cooper, with Jerry Jeudy, who returned today in pads, limited capacity. Usually the way it works is, you put the pads on, you'll start to do your positional drills, and you'll do anything where there is no contact. But usually first day when you're kind of back or are back, you're not doing contact just yet. You're still working into it. It's no different than, any other type of, athletics where, you may be back, but you just don't jump in full bore. You work your way in. And the Browns, with the, large monetary investment that they have in a Jerry Jeudy, that's certain what they're going to do here. The point is for Jerry Jeudy to hit the ground running the last week of August into September, not to pick up the tempo now. You're just continuing to phase him in. But you look at the 4 wide receiver set possibility, of course, of Amari Cooper, Cedric Tillman, I'm just not doing these in any particular order, Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. It is a really, really nice looking group. All bring different aspects to the table. Amari and his great route running, Jerry Jeudy, some circus catchability, and certainly his route running. Elijah Moore, quicker than a hiccup, and you have the physicality and the size of Cedric Tillman. That group is really, really rounded into shape. All 4 of those guys, whether it was Amari Cooper, then the following offseason it was Elijah Moore, drafted Cedric Tillman that offseason, traded for Jerry Jeudy this year. So by 2-year slot, you put together basically the top 4 wide receivers, your wide receiver room, and it's just got a really, really nice look to it, diverse. All guys really looking ready to perform. And for Cedric Tillman, looking like he's going to take that jump here. He's really, really been a guy that's contributed all throughout training camp, and certainly does bring that size factor, something else to the room that the Cleveland Browns are currently lacking at the wide receiver position. So, continuing just to watch it unfold the way it works. The practices in Greenbrier, they had been pushed back. They've had been moved up, dealing with some weather down there, trying to get just the best elements you possibly can to get your players out there. And, of course, avoid injury risk. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen, and it already has happened. But you try to do everything you can to prevent it. We'll continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Baseball season. My Mets, it's going to be make or break. Big West Coast trip. But I'm considering, I still want to go. So they got to go through this West Coast trip and do well. So when they come back home, I can use Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes it getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. They've got last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off by buying last-minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have zone deals, which they choose you choose a section, let Game Time choose the seats. You get a nice big fat savings. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your purchase. Again, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing. Do not miss out. Be a part of it. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Now, we're talking here certainly about the offense, and I've been impressed. I thought it was maybe just going to be a little bit of a slower pace. You got a lot of new offensive coaches. You're installing some new things. You've got some new receivers on this team. So a new backup quarterback, and it's gone a lot better to this point than I anticipated. And I think there's a lot of factors to that. We're going to point out a couple here. For me, one of them to this point, David Njoku. And it wasn't a surprise as to what David Njoku did last year. Everybody knew the ability for David Njoku was there as far as the athleticism, as far as the traits. And there were times where we saw glimpses, and then there were times where there was a lot of missed time. 2018, after a good rookie year, you start to see some good things in 2018. 2019, some missed time. Then all of a sudden, 2020, Browns bring in Austin Hooper because they didn't have a verdict yet on David Njoku. But you've always known that there was this potential with David, and the question was whether or not David was going to be able to, hit that full potential level. And with any athlete, until they can basically unleash the beast of their ability, it changes them once they are able to do that. You see players in whatever sports, all of a sudden they're just, a good player. They can do some good things. And then all of a sudden that year comes where they put it all together and they go from a good player to a great player. And that was certainly the case, for David last year, overcoming the adversity of the accident at home, showing how much the team meant to him by going out there and that Raven game. And he wasn't able to contribute much, but just being out there was important enough. And week in, week out, he just became more and more of a fixture of the offense. And you're seeing that now in training camp. That hasn't left. David knows there's now a capability for David Njoku. There is a standard for David Njoku of what type of player he is and the type of production that David Njoku can put out there week in, week out. So now it's even for David, it's a raising the bar of, I want that. I know what my minimum is. Can I raise that bar once again? And with all that he can do and the fact that he can challenge deep, he runs great crossing routes for a tight end. He is a difficult guy to tackle. The blocking has come light years from when he first joined the NFL. And it's a factor of, and we say it all the time, and the everydayers know, linebackers cannot run with David Njoku, and defensive backs are too small to cover in David Njoku. So it makes him the ultimate mismatch nightmare. Now, playing with this high confidence level after what he did last year. And, certainly, the last couple of weeks of the regular season kind of being the focal point of the offense, being the one who basically shut that door early Thursday night in the clincher against the New York Jets. It has just been an amazing run for number 85. And now that, you've had that taste of such a high level of success, you yearn for it, you churn for it day in, day out, more and more. And you're seeing that David is pretty much the one where it seems like the passing game is going through right now. And if that can continue to be the case, which I don't see why not, it cannot be the case. It just makes Amari Cooper's life easier. It certainly makes Judy's, Moore's, Tillman's, all the other wide receivers, backs coming out of the backfield. Because if you have to account, for two sets of eyes to number 85, you can't single cover Amari Cooper. You can't single cover Elijah Ward. Those guys are going to crush you in one-on-ones. That's just the way it is going to work. So for David, he's making this transformation, making this jump from a very, very good tight end to now a great tight end, top 10 tight end, maybe top 5 tight end. And it just overall makes for so much more that this offense can achieve. And the fact is, if they can get so many teams on their heels and having to so much respect the passing game, respecting number 85 and the wide receivers, the running game, which we don't know much about yet, we won't, obviously, because you just really can't simulate that, and you don't want to simulate that when you're practicing against your own teammates, because all those scrums and piles are how people end up getting hurt, and you certainly don't want to take those chances. So you continue, just with it, and with the ascension of David Njoku, and you talk about Cedric Tillman, who has been really, really good to this point. You see all these, glimpses, and you talk to everybody who's there. We hear about Amari Cooper. We haven't heard, understandably so, enough about Jerry Jeudy to this point, and certainly a lot of his time as he's working his way back in, starting on Thursday. We have a good idea of what Elijah Moore is. But for Cedric, it's really coming together. And, if anybody remembers, I talked all last year about, just the difficulties it must have been for a rookie wide receiver to have to, turn around each week and find that there's somebody else under center. The only real advantage at any time where I think Cedric was truly comfortable last year, ironically enough, of course, was, playing with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. That was his best game last season in Denver, while Dorian Thompson-Robinson started that game before exiting early. Still was a cheap shot. It'll always be a cheap shot. So DTR left that game early, but that was Cedric Tillman's best game of the career. Then you went back, the PJ Walker route. They went back, of course, then at Joe Flacco, and he and Joe Flacco didn't necessarily have a ton of sync with each other. So it was really, I got reps, got a chance to work on some things, but now certainly a lot's being changed with a new offensive coordinator. So Cedric, the playing field is a little bit maybe more even now. Cedric got reps last year, and sometimes it's better. You're going to learn more from your bad reps than you're certainly going to learn from your good reps. That's just the way anything works. You learn more from your mistakes than you learn certainly from your positives. So, it's really been fun for Cedric right now, and just watching him. And, quarterbacks can get away with certain things when your wide receiver is 6'3", 225, high and away balls. You can throw those. You can throw passes to Cedric. To Cedric Tillman that you can't throw to Elijah Moore. And the fact is, because he's a bigger receiver, you can maybe have him run those short, more difficult routes, your 3rd and 4, your 3rd and 5s. But once you start to click on a couple of those, that's when the respect factor comes in, and people have to cheat up a step or two to honor that. And that's what you see today, where you have Cedric blowing past somebody for a 40-yard touchdown. So, Ced's been big. He really, really has. And, I know there's people already saying, well, how are the Browns going to manage all these wide receivers, this year? Well, first off, it's a great stinking problem to have. It's a great problem to have, because we know there's always the question of people missing time or whatever. But, nobody ever complained, that they had too much pizza, right? Nobody ever complained that there was too much beer in the fridge. Nobody is going to complain that the Browns are too deep at wide receiver. It will work itself out. Everybody will get opportunities. But I think the fact that we've got, Cedric Tillman, who you would say is probably wide receiver 4, Elijah Moore. But I think it's that you have these guys who are probably wide receiver 3 and 4 pushing closer up to the pack. And, it just helps Deshaun Watson and his confidence level with every one of these guys. It doesn't have to be, all right, 3rd and 7. If it's not Amari, it's not David, we're probably not getting this first down. That is what's going to make this season hopefully even better than last season. That's what makes it where you can maybe say it's not just the playoffs, it's getting wins in the playoffs, it's getting to the AFC Championship game. You look at so many big games in football history, and it's not necessarily the star quarterback, the star receiver. Sometimes, a lot of times, it is the star quarterback and wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, because everybody put all their attention on the other top targets, and the quarterback still had confidence in somebody else to get the play done. We'll continue on here. We said D'Onta Foreman injury. We'll get the latest on that. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. We get to the summer and to this time of year, and the sports aren't sportsing the way I want them to or the way you want them to, but we're getting closer. We've got football this week. But the thing is, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. Visit FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Closing out your latest Locked On Browns, your host, Jeff Lloyd. As always, we appreciate everybody who takes the time to make Locked On Browns their first listen. If you are not subscribed to Locked On Browns YouTube channel right by now, you need to join the everyday crowd. It's a great crowd. You need to be part of it, and you will get all the notifications on whenever any content drops. And, of course, show is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Certainly a scare out of the Greenbrier today. And my first inkling and first thought when I heard about the D'Onta Foreman injury And at the time, what we knew was severe, taken off the field, putting on a board, taken off, on the medical golf cart. The next thing he was getting in a helicopter and flown to a different state because it was the closest helicopter. It was the closest hospital to where they were. So he went out to Roanoke, Virginia to get checked. But my first initial thought was, if we changed all these things on special teams, I thought the point of it was to hopefully try and prevent player injury. Luckily for Dante Foreman, the word is he is good. He's been cleared. He is ready to go back to the Greenbrier and join his teammates. Again, we don't know if it's a concussion. There's a very good chance it could be. But structurally, his body is in good shape. His neck, his shoulders, apparently all his extremities, he is moving okay. But that was my first concern. And my first scare certainly was that, this, was, somebody in, for the running back position, it all comes down to, when Nick comes back, can they tread water while Nick is gone? I still think Jerome Ford will shine to be the lead running back in the time he's away. I think there is going to be a nice role for Nyheim Hines for this team, just with his versatility, the things he can do out of the backfield. I was never that sold on Foreman. Not that, there's just been a lot of mileage and a lot of hits on that body, but this certainly does open up the opportunity for undrafted free agent Aiden Robbins. Certainly opens up, an opportunity for maybe Pierre Strong. And there were some issues last year as far as, holding on to the ball for Pierre Strong. But, I do believe it was the Seahawk game. Pierre Strong was able to contribute over 100 total yards. So there is talent within that body. There's no doubt. But the Browns running back, and we'll see. Because if we hear Foreman, it's going to be a week or two. You're playing preseason games next week. Right now, Dante Foreman's not playing that game. Most likely Nyheim Hines is not playing that game. Nick Chubb is not playing that game. I really don't want to risk Jerome Ford playing that game. So the Browns may be in a situation here where they may have to get a running back here and quickly. Is it going to be just, a flyer on a guy? I was actually hoping my guy Dylan Johnson, who somehow already got waived out of his undrafted free agent role to Tennessee Titans, was still available. He already got scooped up by the Carolina Panthers, so he's there. Do you want to go to a guy like Damian Harris, who recently retired in March, and maybe try to get, him to maybe say, what, maybe I'm not done. Maybe I just needed the right opportunity. Maybe the Browns could be that opportunity. Veteran Matt Breida, 29 years old, is out there and available. These are all things to consider. Shelby Harris is still out of practice, which means that's most likely you're starting two defensive tackles, Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris. Certainly, again, we've talked about this. We'll continue to talk about this. You've got that Mike Hall, Maurice Hurst, Siaki Ika, all battling. Mike Hall is going to be my battling for legit playing time. For Hurst, Ika are one of those two battling for the last remaining spots at defensive tackle on the final 53-man roster. Now we get to the linebacker position. Tony Fields is apparently in a walking boot. Charlie Thomas, who was an undrafted free agent last year out of Georgia Tech, he was put on the injured reserve list, injured/reserve list, so which means Charlie Thomas has sustained an injury. So certainly an issue with him. So certainly questions with that, about that. And, for Fields, and, look, I think there's a really good chance Fields make this roster. But we've been talking about this. It is Fields. It is Devin Bush. It is Diabate. It is Bookie Watson. You probably have four linebackers fighting for three roster spots. Who's going to be the odd man out? And for Tony Fields, certainly not the best scenario for him to be injured at this point. I do think, regardless, he's probably one of those four that has a lock on making that final 53. But it's certainly not the most advantageous situation for him to not be getting reps right now. So, you brought back Caleb Johnson. They brought back him. He was released about a week ago. But certainly a guy who's familiar with everything, can come right in, contribute immediately. Should be a guy that's going to play a lot in the first preseason game for this team. So these are all factors that this team has to deal with. And, everybody's got injuries. And, for the Browns, you're hoping. And look, none of it, other than the Foreman thing today, seemed to be really, really serious. We're waiting for Tomlinson coming back off, the knee scope. Greg Newsome coming back off the hamstring surgery. But, you want to have all your guys out there. You want to have everybody the best chance to compete. And you remember, like Jarvis Landry said years ago in Hard Knocks, is, you don't want to have some of your top players have to take more reps than they have to take. But guys got to go out there to make sure everybody gets a quality look. So you certainly don't want to be in a position where you're overworking any of your talents at this point in the season. It's just foolish. It becomes an issue, and then that's how these lower legs and these calves and these hammies and these rolled ankles, tend to pop up even more and certainly tend to prolong as the summer goes on. So these are all things you got to watch out for. These are all things you got to deal with. So, for the Browns, it's been good news that nothing appears to be super serious on the injury front. Certainly got a scare from Dante Foreman today, but it looks like everything on that front is going to be okay. Cleveland Browns practice continues. Offense has looked much better than I anticipated to this point. And kudos to DW and all the guys on offense for that. I am Jeff Lloyd. I appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen. The everyday crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. Join the filthy animals if you haven't by subscribing to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.